Yo, what's up? It's someone that's no one, and welcome back to another episode of Substances Explained. Today we're covering a fairly common over-the-counter substance that'll be used recreationally, and that's triple C's, otherwise known as cough, cold, and congestion medicine. This over-the-counter contains the powerful dissociative Dextromethorphan, or DXM. Then the other half contains the antihistamine, Chlorpheniramine. Together in this over-the-counter at high doses, it can create a powerful recreational tripping experience, but it also poses many dangers and has shown to be life-threatening. So here we are to cover the ins and outs of it. We'll get into the chemistry, the pharmacology, the history and culture behind it, how and why it got its reputation, the effects of it medicinally and recreationally, the dangers of it, and pretty much anything relevant to triple C's. And if you have no idea what a triple C experience can be like, I recommend you check out one of these trip reports I reference here. I always bring up a reference video for this series, a report or two that inspired the making of this. Which for this video, we'll be referencing a triple C nightmare, sent in by an anonymous user, mental hell, sent in by Nicholas Cusack, and then the report hitting on the mother spirit, sent in by Beta, where he also took Diphenhydramine. Each one of these reports detail well how a triple C experience can go, and why some may choose to do it. So check out at least one of these before or after this to get a better idea of how this experience can go. And joining me again for another collab is the homie Low-Key Fish. Fish was on the last episode of Substances Explained, where we covered the over-the-counter Benzydamine. And Fish makes similar content on his channel, getting into different substances. And just real quick guys, Fish is cool, we fuck with Fish. Fish is a good guy. I love the energy he brings on. He always brings good information, a great visual presentation, and I feel like it's a nice contrast to everything. And I originally planned for us to do a back-to-back collab for this series, so I figured we would have a similar theme and cover two different over-the-counters. So make sure to check out his channel and subscribe. But this is one I'm sure you'll appreciate. A good handful can probably relate to it, so I'm happy to be talking about this. But that's about that. Let me know what we should do next, and make sure to like and subscribe if you do enjoy this. So without further ado, let's dive right into this. So to get things going like always, we gotta start with the early history with it and its chemistry. What is it, and how did it come to be? Well, I did say this is a combination substance, so we'll take a look at the origins of both ingredients. And we're gonna keep it somewhat brief and not too in-depth with each one, just because the focus is triple C's. We'll have other videos where we get into DXM and Chlorpheniramine on their own in a lot more detail, because I have to say, DXM is quite complex. But this video will mainly focus on the combination and the over-the-counter. So to start with DXM, it's the D isomer of the substance, methorphan. Its mirror image, level-methorphan, acts as an opioid, which methorphan itself was patented in 1947 by the pharmaceutical company Hoffmann La Roche, and only years later in 1952 did DXM get patented. By the year 1958, it was approved for use by the FDA, as even the military stepped in search of a less addictive antitussive replacement for codeine at the time. DXM showed not to have opioid activity, but still retained the cough suppressant effect, so this was viewed as ideal. So then came the first brand of DXM, which was called Ramiller, which does seem to still be sold in other countries. While effective, it actually didn't take very long at all for there to be abuse of it. By the mid-60s, it was known that Ramiller could produce a type of recreational experience, and many reports do suggest this. So around 1973, it was pulled from the market. DXM itself didn't get banned, the cough syrups remained, but the Ramiller tablets were gone in attempts to lower abuse rates, at least in the US. You can find abuse rates all across the world really with DXM in all kinds of forms. Point is, DXM has been around for quite a long time now. I mean literally, we have data showing it's been abused since the 60s. Of course things did slow down a little bit, but you can find a lot of evidence suggesting DXM culture rising during the late 70s and the 80s, and then coming into full fruition in the 90s with the rise of the internet. Certain websites took hold and information spread like wildfire, with not only the existence of tripping on it, but also things like directions for extraction, trip reports, reviews and guides, where to get it, how to get DXM powder, vendors, and all this stuff came in. It's pretty wild to think about this, and that the culture's been around for more than over 20, 30 years at this point, and the abuse of it even longer, more like 50 years plus. But the ban over Miller just slowed down the abuse of DXM. It didn't stop it. Companies attempted to make products less appealing, altering things like taste, dosage, and having other additives. But still, DXM use persisted. Chlorpheniramine is a common ingredient, and has been since the early days. Typically it helps clear mucus. But in large doses, it notably produces a lot of nausea. This and other ingredients have been combined with DXM in attempts to provide a more therapeutic effect, and lower abuse rates. And that's where we bring out the other part of triple C's, that being the antihistamine, chlorpheniramine. Now, chlorpheniramine was synthesized around the same time in 1951 by Nathan Sperber under the pharmaceutical company Schering Corporation. They were searching for non-sedative antihistamines and found a subclass of antihistamines known as alkylamines. And indeed, chlorpheniramine is known to be significantly less drowsy compared to other antihistamines. This substance has had its own life as well, but not anything like DXM, where it's fallen in the line of abuse and recreation. Instead, it's been a pretty standard over-the-counter that's used to help with allergies. The most common brand probably being chlorpheniramine. So you're probably wondering, where along the way did chlorpheniramine come in, or popularly termed triple C's? And just to talk on the name real quick, the triple C's do stand for cough, cold, and congestion, something along those terms because chlorpheniramine can be used for those symptoms. And also, if you take a look at one of the most preferred options, chlorpheniramine cough and cold, there are 3 C's labeled on the pills. But anyways, the first chlorpheniramine product actually also came around the same time when DXM and chlorpheniramine were patented, and that was sometime in 1949. At least that's when the name was first trademarked. But there really isn't a ton of information about this, or the lineage of chlorpheniramine products, but it does seem to be that the first chlorpheniramine products were purposed using penicillin, a pretty common antibiotic. Now, from what I can tell, there are at least 2 chlorpheniramine products marketed during the 50s. One was in a soluble powder, and the other in tablet form. Along with this, they included chlorpheniramine and sodium cellulate in the soluble powder. Sodium cellulate could act as a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, but the idea of using penicillin was to combat the infection directly as well as treat the symptoms. Which of course though, things aren't always straightforward like that. Then for the penicillin tablets, it also contained chlorpheniramine, but also aspirin and phytidine, which was used to help combat fever and pain, but then also a bit of caffeine as well. Quite an odd mixture, but it wasn't until sometimes in the 70s or 80s did they finally introduce DXM. Another thing, one of the Ullman brothers, Duane Ullman, actually used an empty bottle of chlorpheniramine as a guitar slide in the late 60s. Just a cool little fact, maybe he set in motion for DXM to be added into it, because I do have to say that the Ullman brothers can be very fitting on a DXM trip. Then also there was this pretty strange marketing that was backed by a Schering Corporation, like this mortar and pestle mug, presumably for crushing the tablets, or how about this custom chlorpheniramine card deck in 1967, which this is cool as fuck that this even exists, but kinda trippy in a sense too, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was more than this. But anyways, enough with the early history. We can assume it's likely the abuse of chlorpheniramine came sometime around in the 80s the latest. DXM use rates were thought to rise during this time, but we have confirmation of chlorpheniramine use by the 90s with the rise of the internet. Now before moving forward, I want to talk about the pharmacology a little bit here, and just briefly explain it for DXM and chlorpheniramine. DXM's main recreational activity is thought to come from NMDA antagonism, which this is what brings on all the feelings of dissociation. But also there's activity going on with opiate sigma receptor agonism, serotonin reuptake inhibition, as a calcium channel blocker, and as a nicotinergic antagonist. And there is most likely more going on that we don't know about, especially when you consider its metabolite, dextromethorphan, because it just hasn't been fully studied. But quite a lot going on just by itself, just by what we know so far, which this makes it a somewhat delicate substance for combinations. But I brought up chlorpheniramine is an antihistamine, which an antihistamine with DXM can present complications. But also, it has shown to have potential anticholinergic activity, but what's even bigger, it has shown to act as a potent serotonin reuptake inhibitor. The potency is comparable to tricyclic antidepressants, and does suggest there is unexplored antidepressant potential with chlorpheniramine. There is also some very slight activity with dopamine and norepinephrine inhibition, but this serotonin activity is highly significant, and tells us that this combination is most likely very dangerous. Two substances inhibiting serotonin can easily bring on serotonin syndrome, which can be like hell and life-threatening. Besides that, there is a risk of other side effects like tachycardia, raised blood pressure, tremors, seizures as it lowers the threshold, especially in those predisposed, impaired balance and coordination, drowsiness, confusion, sweating, chills, nausea, psychosis, blurred vision, dehydration, and much more. Really, the cardiotoxicity, the seizure risk, and serotonin syndrome risk are probably the biggest things to look out for. Which, not a great list of potential side effects to put up with, just to get a tripping experience in. But it is possible though. We've had reports where euphoric, beautiful, satisfying states have been reached, life-changing ones. Notably the report hitting on the mother spirit. But pretty much all of the reports we cover with triple C's, the users have noted how it did have very negative health impacts. Besides that, there's also the risk of overdosing potentially on another ingredient. Now these days, there's like 5 to 10 different quercetin medicines, at least on their website. And quercetin is marketed and stands out as quercetin HPB. That stands for quercetin high blood pressure, meaning their products are designed for safe usage if you have high blood pressure. And that's because they don't use decongestants, which can cause a spike in blood pressure. Of course, recreationally though, with the high doses, raised blood pressure most likely will be a side effect. And while today there is many options to choose from, but back in the 90s and 2000s, there were like only 3 products. You had the quercetin cough and cold, the cold and flu, and then the extra strength. The cough and cold has 30 mg of DXM hydrobromide and 4 mg of chlorpheniramine maleate. But not everyone knows, or knew this, or to check for it. So some would end up getting the extra strength, which this contains acetaminophen, at 320 mg per serving. Now if we look at some data, most people were taking at least something like 6+, some places more like 10 or 15. And your daily limit for acetaminophen on average is 3,000 to 4,000 mg, but it's not recommended you take more than 1,000 mg every 4 to 6 hours. So hepatotoxicity is a real risk in some cases, and that can easily be fatal. And the thing is with quercetin, it was reported to be the most popular DXM product for some time, at least during the 2000s. It's hard to say as of recent, as no large-scale epidemiological studies have been carried out. But I figure with the rise of the DXM community more, and the internet in general, that it probably has gone out of popularity. Especially with all the options too now, with the robo-tabs, the gel tabs, there's even hydrobromide delsum now. But it's just pretty wild to think that quercetin was the DXM product of choice for recreational usage for at least a decade, probably closer to 2. And this most likely did play a strong role into the perception that was built with DXM in the early days. There's a much higher chance for hospitalizations and complications to arise by abusing quercetin versus a product with solely DXM. Case reports would arise with quercetin most often, and when all these dangerous side effects were occurring, it probably gave DXM a bad rep. And it's also why DXM still retains these certain street names to this day, like Red Skittles, the Red Devils, things along those lines. It could refer to the gels, but the origins for this lie with triple C's. But I think we can really just narrow this down to it being an availability heuristic. The quercetin cough and cold has 30 mg of DXM per pill, which is a pretty fair amount actually concerning just DXM. So you wouldn't need to take a ridiculous amount for a trip. Then also, it was the only pill version for quite some time. There may have been some other obscure products, but I don't believe there were many options beyond using syrup. Which like I said, they did try to use bad taste, lower the dose per serving, also using other ingredients like guaf. So this probably influenced DXM users to look beyond to any other options for their trips. And even with information being spread on the internet about how dangerous triple C's are since the 90s, of course it wasn't well known or widespread for quite some time. It probably wasn't until the 2010s or so did a shift finally take place. Even now, I still don't feel like robo-tripping is that well known. Much more than before, certainly. I would guess maybe something like 1 in every 5 people know about it. But that depends where you're asking too. A good thing is though, today, you will get a lot of warnings to steer clear of triple C's. So unless you're being reckless, you're being ignorant by not doing enough research, or maybe you're knowingly taking them, I don't think this will be most people's first choice these days. Still, it was the first choice option at one point in time for a somewhat long period, and it has caused a lot of people complications, damage, and even their lives. It's easily one of the most dangerously abused over-the-counters that's shown up in history. Antihistamine toxicity can be heavily damaging, and with the research showing chlorpheniramine's activity for serotonin, I think that somewhat puts this on overboard concerning the risk factor for serotonin syndrome and damage to occur. And of course, in some cases, you have APAP to worry about, which honestly, acetaminophen may be one of the riskiest over-the-counters for people at times because they take too much accidentally. So really, triple C's just brings up so many red flags. It's super taxing on the body, and it can easily end up being too much, possibly taking your life. There may be some other over-the-counter abuse that can compare in danger, but I don't think there's been another that's been as popular as triple C's. Maybe something like Benadryl in recent years, but even so, I'd say triple C's have added risk with it being a combination drug. But to summarize and wrap things up, here's Fish to go over the history and pop culture. And to finish things off, he has a crazy example of when his friend took triple C's.
Yo, what is good? My name is Okie Fish, and I'm here to talk about the history behind the culture of DXM and triple C's. Plus, I'll tell you guys about my own experience with robo-tripping and tell you an insane story at the end. Starting with the history, the recreational use of DXM medications like triple C was a problem dating back all the way to the 1960s. This was when the drug was first marketed as an over-the-counter cough suppressant.
Oh, it's over the counter, it's safe.
During that time, the abuse of DXM for its mind-altering effects was increasing so much so that it led to the removal of certain formulations from the market. 20 years later, there was a resurgence of DXM abuse in the punk community during the 1980s. Among the popular medications containing DXM was Robitussin cough syrup and other equivalents. This was often the preferred substance of abuse, which led to several street drug names for it like RoboCop and RoboShuffle. These days, the internet has further increased the usage of DXM among many people, especially teenagers.
But isn't he only 3 years old?
A quick Google search brings up dozens of sites describing how to get high off DXM. Some even specifically describe the exact amount of drops of something you need in order to take to get high.
Gets you high.
Furthermore, the abuse of over-the-counter drugs like triple C's is most common among adolescents, teens, and young adults due to being glorified in songs, music videos, and social media. The drug is often stocked on open shelves, making it susceptible to shoplifting. This has actually caused some stores to store it behind the counter instead.
Got him.
Its accessibility and relatively low price make it particularly attractive to young people, especially when compared to illicit drugs. It's a cheap high and not illegal if kids get caught, and it will often go unnoticed until someone takes too much or combines it with other drugs to get a horrible reaction and overdose.
I'm gonna die.
One of my good friends who I used to ride the bus with to school every day would tell me how he would have an ego death from tripping on triple C's. And I've had plenty of ego deaths myself, but mainly all from psychedelics, at least at that time. So it definitely intrigued me whenever he would describe these experiences. At the time, our local grocery store would stock them in the medicine aisle on the bottom shelf, and this kid would go and stuff his pockets with as many boxes of triple C's as he could carry and just walk out. He never got caught by the store, but he did get caught by his mom, and I'll explain how that happened in just a sec. Anyway, one time on the way home from school, he told me he was gonna take 48 pills all at once to see what would happen. Keep in mind, you only need like 5 or 6 pills to start feeling the effects, but sure enough, he took 48 of them, and the next day he was telling me how he thought he had legitimately died and was in the afterlife. Yet somehow, miraculously, he came back to reality and lived to tell the story. However, that's not where it ends. The story's about to get way more intense. The following week, him and I are on the bus on the way home, and he's now telling me that he's gonna take 96 pills all at once. At this point, I start trying to talk him out of it and persuade him not to do it because of how insane that sounded. The most I had ever taken was like 10 pills, and although I never had an ego death from it, it was still enough for me to feel a little something. something. But this kid was about to take 96 pills, which is just an absurd amount of triple C's. So on that ride home, I spent the entire time trying to talk him out of it, but he was still urgent on taking them. And instead of getting off at my bus stop, I get off at his stop and walks back to his house with him. As we walk there, I'm still trying to convince him not to take it, and fortunately by the time we arrive at his house, he ends up changing his mind and told me he would not do it. So cool, he said he wasn't gonna do it anymore. I dap him up, say see you later, and I go back to my crib. Well, the next day, he wasn't at school, and I come to find out later that evening, his mom found him having a seizure in his room, coughing up blood because he took nearly 100 pills of triple C's. They had to rush him to the hospital and I guess get his stomach pumped or something. He did end up recovering from it and was released from the hospital, but he definitely had to have permanent brain damage after that. He was a good guy too, he just liked getting fucked up. Anyway, that's just a little bit about the culture behind triple C's and how it can be abused. Stay safe out there, everybody. My name is Fish and I stay low key. Peace out.
Alright, so we're going to end things here, guys. We pretty much laid down what's up with triple C's, the history behind it, both from a pharmaceutical level and recreationally, how dangerous it can be, and the whys of it being so popular. Let me know if you think we missed anything big with this. Again, it isn't everything, but heavily focused on triple C's. There's a ton more to get into with DXM, but I'll have another video for that. So let me know if you guys like this video and what you want to see next. There's a ton of directions we can take things, and I just absolutely love making these. So make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more. Besides that, check out the socials, check out the Patreon, the YouTube memberships for exclusive trip reports and content. Feel free to email me or submit a report in the description, join the Discord, and make sure to look out for the next video, and check out past videos you haven't seen yet. We got some fire story times coming up, some reviews and whatnot, a ton to check out, so don't miss out. But it's been someone that's no one, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.